And yeah, I'm going to hand over to our Vice President, Verinder, who will tell you a little bit more about InState.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you all for joining the first Consulting Professional Development Series event. And of course, thank you all for becoming InState members. Today, we've got a really great talk lined up for you. But before I pass on to Yasmin and Jonny, I'll quickly give an introduction to InState and our mission. So InState was founded earlier this summer. We're a student-led social mobility organisation exclusively for UK state school educated university students, as I'm sure you all know as members. But just, I think a personal point, this has really allowed us to, relate to the struggles that state school students entering the corporate industries are facing, and how to tackle these in hopefully a more effective way. So the internal team has been working really, really hard over the summer to bring you, our members, our InState programs. So we have our mentoring program, which is literally just launching this week. So if you didn't have a chance to register for that, don't worry, we've got another one coming next term. So I'm sure you'll see all over our social medias over Christmas that you can register for that. Opportunities listings, as well as I'm sure you've seen on your InState logins, and of course our professional development series. So I will now pass over to Yasmin, who will be hosting this first Consulting Professional Development series.
Thanks, Verinder. I'm actually just going to hand straight back over to Jonny to get back started. Also, if anyone has any questions, I'd recommend just putting them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the slides. Thank you.
Cheers, Yasmin. Slightly weird for me, never really done anything like this before, but thanks for having me, and well done on everything that you've done with InState. I think it's a great initiative, and I can confirm that being a state schooler, it's definitely quite difficult to sit within the sort of professional industries as a state schooler. I think I'm one of two in a 15-person cohort in strategy, and so well done everyone for having the ambition to pursue this kind of career. It's definitely worthwhile. So Yasmin's asked me to cover a few things that I've put on a couple of slides, but feel free to jump in with any questions. I think if you put them in the chat, that will probably work best. So I'll give you a little introduction to sort of my background, then the difference between consulting firms. I've obviously got the best knowledge around strategy, which is where I am right now. But I also went through a process that many of you will go through in the coming weeks of applying to different consulting houses. Then what we look for, and broadly what makes a good consultant, what consultants are looking for, your CV and your cover letter. There's a couple of tips that I'm sure will be helpful on that. Then the online test assessment centres and the kind of overall experience. So I'll canter through. I'm sure questions will probably be the most helpful. So me, I went to a school called Robert Smythe Academy, very fond memories in Leicester, state school educated. Didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left. I chose to do economics at the University of Bath because I liked Bath as a city, and economics I felt I could do a lot of jobs with, so I really didn't have an idea of what I wanted to go into. I've done a lot of different sort of work experience things before I arrived at consulting, many of them in the startup industry. So I've founded a couple of businesses, been through sort of the multi-million-pound raises that you hear about, and chosen the one in the bottom right corner, sold this year, which was good news to hear. But I had a very mixed CV, and I got 62% in economics at the University of Bath. So there is hope for everyone. I definitely didn't go in there as sort of an Oxbridge graduate with top grades, which many of my colleagues are. So I think, yeah, that's the sort of first message that I would give to everyone, that don't be put off if you don't feel like you've got the grades to to enter this kind of industry, because you definitely have. It's just about portraying and demonstrating your attitudes and sort of ambition to learn and get stuck in. So definitely, if you're interested, apply to anywhere that you would like to work or that you think you would like to work. And where you might like to work is one of these companies. There are obviously loads of consultants in London. The main difference to look at is strategy consulting versus management consulting. So everyone has heard in the strategy world, sort of the MBB is the acronym used. So you've got McKinsey, Bain, BCG. These guys, churn out many of the CEOs in the world at the FTSE 100 companies, etc. They are pure strategists and very expensive, as is in the news right now. I think it was published the other day. BCG are doing the track and trace program for the government, and partners are getting charged that at £7,000 a day to the government, which caused a bit of a storm in the news. But that's the reality of it. They charge a lot of money for their time, and you get a lot of top graduates applying to these kind of places. And what they will do, I suppose the main difference I should really cover is what they do. So they're doing a lot of very high level design of those kind of programs. So in track and trace, they'll be looking at different countries, what they do. In Asia, they've been through this kind of thing before in the pandemic. So track and trace to them was something that they knew. So they'll be going out and finding out what that looks like, what good looks like, and then applying it to the UK economy, the landscape, the locations, etc., and designing all of that. And then what a management consultant would do is pick up that design and go and implement it. So actually do the build of the program and put the people in place to project manage it, and it's a lot longer. So the differences that you see between the two is one of them is the length of project. So as a strategist, the longest project I've been on is 6 weeks, and you'll normally produce a beautiful slide deck of 20 slides maybe, that has everything on them, and that will get given over to either the company or the client, or a management consultancy that will then go and implement that. And that's why for a management consultant, projects are usually longer, up to a few years potentially, because you're going through a whole implementation program and those phases. I think it's also worth mentioning that the difference in salary is quite a lot between strategy and management. So obviously Strategy and is the strategy house attached to PwC. The management consultants get paid about probably 30-40% less than the strategists that sit in Strategy and. So if you're applying, and for Strategy and, it's worth knowing that you can only apply to one or the other, you can't apply to both. Then that is something to consider. And then within those two groups, you've got different types of work as well. So people like Bain will do a lot of due diligence work. So commercial due diligences are part of a transaction. So if one company is looking to buy another, they will do an assessment of the market, whether it's growing, the company, their competitors, and that sort of outside-in analysis on whether it is a reasonable price or reasonable company for the acquirer to buy. So they'll often work with PE companies that are looking at acquiring a company. And then you've got people like Strategy and. So we have a team that sits in Strategy and that does that, but we also have a corporate strategy team where I sit, and that's a lot of pure strategy work. So we often say that we probably do more pure strategy work than any of the other strategy houses, because we have a dedicated team to it. And so we'll be working with chief operating officers of your big media companies, or your big oil conglomerates, etc., working with CEOs and COOs on designing transformation programs or restructuring or technology initiatives across the world, really. So there's a difference there in the work that you do. And then in consulting, similarly, it breaks down more by the type of implementations you're doing. So if you're doing people, an organisation, that's often restructuring, changing teams, or building up a skill set within a company. Accenture are obviously very big in the digital space. They do a lot of tech transformations, etc. And IPM love implementing cloud solutions now. So there's variances within all of them, and it's worth being aware of those. But all of these people will look for similar skill sets. They all break down into IQ and EQ. So intelligent quotient and emotional quotient. Your IQ is your the skills that everyone often associates with consulting or banking or any of these sort of graduate roles, and that's your data analysis, your ability to research, synthesize large texts, and understand them quickly. So business acumen is something that's never going to come through really in your academics, unless you did a business management degree maybe, and you can demonstrate it in a couple of group projects or things like that. But business acumen essentially is being able to understand an industry, the business models, the way it functions, supply chains very quickly. And in our industry, especially as a strategist, it's essential, because you will land into a project, be talking to a COO of one of the world's biggest companies, and they'll be talking about new business models, the market conditions, etc. And you've got to be able to converse with them on those topics quite quickly. So having that commercial awareness is really important and really valued, and will be tested in interviews, especially if you're going to strategy, where you'll do a case interview, which is looking at that almost completely. And then your writing and those good skills that everyone considers is important. But then EQ is the one that I think not so many people get right in your applications or interviews, and is often the thing that's picked up on once we do a round of interviews. People will come back and say, this person just didn't quite have the confidence to speak, or they weren't comfortable presenting in a team environment. I couldn't see them getting on with everyone. As a consultant pre-COVID, you often were locked in a hotel for 6 weeks, Monday to Thursday. So being able to get on with people, being able to socialize, being able to maintain good working relationships is really important, both internally and externally, because for a client in that situation, you're often going in and the client doesn't really want you there. The work has been agreed by a C-suite executive, but you'll be working with middle management or below on making a change or trying to find out information, and their instant reaction will be, my job's under threat. Why do you think I can't do my job? So having those conversations and being able to find the right information and ask the right questions is really important. So ultimately the interview will be asking, can I trust this person in a room with the client? And I think you need to be able to demonstrate that by being able to be comfortable in a room with them. So that's definitely, when you're coming into the interview stage, demonstrating that EQ is really important. But I think also being able to talk about the kind of teams that you've worked in or played sports in or things like that, having those on your CV definitely give an indicator that you can cope with that kind of environment. So this all sort of leads into your CV and your cover letter, and what you want to demonstrate is those two things. I think on my CV I even wrote a sentence around, I have a good balance of EQ and IQ. A couple of tips when writing a CV or cover letter, I have looked at a lot now in the last year or so. One simple thing is you can remove all pronouns, and so what I mean by that is not, I have recently graduated from the University of Bath where I read economics. It's just recently graduated from the University of Bath. It's a very business-like technique to not speak in the first or third person and actually remove pronouns entirely. It makes sentences appear really concise and to the point, which is, especially in consulting, what they're looking for, people that can communicate quickly and effectively. and don't fill sentences with sort of unnecessary words. I think one of my seniors told me early on that they reckoned in most sentences you can probably remove 40% of words, and it's pretty spot on. So if you go back to your CV now, I'm sure you can remove a good few words. Communicating value through quantitative statements. So all of the things that you write on that beautiful 20-pack of PowerPoint slides needs to have a purpose. And I think in a lot of CVs, everyone describes what they've done. 6-week internship at Goldman Sachs and filled in a few spreadsheets. Well, like when people are reading a spreadsheet, they want to know why, and the interviewer will always ask why, but it should already be on the page. So what were you doing in Excel? What value did it have? How much time did it save someone else? What percentage increase in portfolio returns did you find, or things like that. So I think on my own CV, I did some sales work out in Berlin for a startup, and I think one of the points was personally signed 12 new clients and increasing monthly revenue by 33%. So instantly the interviewer knows exactly what I've done. I've signed 12 people. They don't need to know that it wasn't for very much money. And the impact that it had in a quantitative way is 33% growth, which is exactly how a consultant would talk in terms of growth or differentials, things like that. So all of those, and almost every bullet point on your CV should take that kind of form, be exactly what you did and the kind of impact that it had. Structure, I think it's an easy way to stand out if your CV is structured slightly differently to everyone else's. Everyone has, a very line by line CV or a lot of waffle on it. I think if you can put it in a super concise way, use colours, bolding, italics, underlined, simple things like that, then for consulting, communicating things on a page is super important. So just having a clean, good looking CV instantly puts you with a tick next to your name before they've started reading. So you've got that reviewer in a positive frame of mind. I think like the average time, someone's worked it out, I think the average time someone looks at a CV is 6 seconds. So no one's reading the content in 6 seconds. It's all coming from what it looks like, which is the same with slides. So if I don't know what I'm talking about at work, I normally try and make the slide look as good as possible. Then the fourth point that's on there, 1 page, CVs on 2 pages, for some people is just an absolute no. And I think everyone can put their experience on 1 page. No one has done that much experience that they can't fit it on 1 page. And if you can't, then maybe go back to point 2 and try and cut words and communicate things in a different way and put them in a concise manner, because the best CVs are never on 2 pages. It sort of indicates that maybe you're struggling to communicate what you've done and the impact that you've had in a concise way. Name drop, that only really applies to a cover letter, but I think, so I applied to 11 consulting companies when I graduated, and I think I spoke to someone on the phone for at least 15 minutes at 9 of them. And every single person that I spoke to was mentioned in my cover letter of that company. I mean, people get a lot of requests. I was having this conversation with a couple of colleagues earlier, a lot of requests to pick up the phone and jump on, but most people will say yes or answer a few questions. As soon as they do, put their name in a CV and or in your cover letter, sorry, and just mention that what they said led to you wanting to apply there, and frame it in that kind of manner. It shows that you've done your research, you've gone to the effort to speak to someone, you actually have an idea of what it might be like, and you're still interested in applying, so that's a positive. So I think that's an instant way to win a couple of points on your cover letter. And be concise, I've kind of talked about throughout. So yeah, there are 6 things to go away with that hopefully are helpful on CV and cover letters. But I think most places are sort of coming to the end of applications, so I'm guessing most of you have written your CVs and cover letters already. But hopefully it's helpful if you haven't. Okay, online tests. So going from left to right, numerical reasoning, grammatical reasoning. They all use different ones. I think Oliver Wyman, I remember, is really old school. I think it's 20 questions. You've got half an hour, and they're really quite sort of brain teaser type questions. You know, Phil, Bill, and Paul are filling a swimming pool, and one can carry half a bucket, one can carry a full bucket, one can carry 2 buckets. How quickly can they fill the pool? Those kind of questions. Others are much more around being able to read data and understand what the data is saying, and then answer a question, which is maybe what most people think about the numerical reasoning test. I think with those, practice is the main thing. You get used to reading graphs and data and understanding what's going on, and the quicker that you can read the graphs, the more time you have to calculate the answer. What I would also say about that is structuring your notes can be really helpful. So a lot of these online assessments will ask a question early on and then use that answer sort of 3 or 4 questions later. So if you haven't got your notes structured well, then it's hard you have to go back and recalculate the answer for that one to then answer the current question. Whereas if you've just got it on a page, you can flick to it, and that saves you a lot of time. Diagrammatical reasoning, quite really hard tests. Personally find them quite difficult. I think they're really popular in sort of applying to MI5 and those kind of things, like the code breaker challenges. I remember Bain having a really hard diagrammatical one. There's a couple of tips on that, where you can pick an object, and then as you go down the sequence, so these are the questions where it's like a load of shapes within shapes, and they all move, and you have to spot the pattern and pick what the next one will be. So one of the tips is if you pick one shape and then follow it all the way through, that will normally tell you at least one of the movements that's going on. And then if you pick another one, hopefully that gets you to the answer. Situational judgment, really hard, but and I don't know the answers to the situational judgments. The new ones, like Deloitte, I think there's someone with a GoPro strapped to them, and they walk around an office, and like they'll walk into an office and someone's being rude to them, and they'll say, "What would you do next?" And I think with those, my tips are just to take the time and just think, what would you actually do? I think a lot of them are geared up to tailored to the people that are already working at the company. So there's an element that I would say just be yourself, because if you're not, you might get through, but actually the culture there, it's an indicator of the culture, and you might not enjoy it. But yeah, they are changing. Others are just done in written form, saying like, what would you do in this situation, things like that. And normally they're fairly reasonable and obvious, unless your moral compass is a bit off. But I'm sure you'll be all right. And then online games, I stuck that on there because we use it at PwC and everyone talks about it. Whenever new people join, it's like, oh, did you go through the games? There's 2 companies. One is called Pymetrics and one's Arctic Shore. And they have like an app where you have to download the app and play a number of games. And it's a psychometric test. Again, what I would say on that is I know for a fact that ours would, the sort of what good is and like what a good score is was done on the people that already work there. So they took a load of people at PwC and then ran the test on them, and that kind of set the benchmark that people scored against. Now we're a diverse company, and we don't really have much of a sort of particular profile that we're looking for. So I'm assuming that our boundaries are quite wide on that, but the other companies that use it would definitely have profiled it on their employees as well. And then it's kind of like, are you a good fit in the company? So again, be yourself. The culture might not be right for you. It might not be what you enjoy. So take your time, and don't try and second guess the question. I think just play it as you see it. It's things like a spinning wheel and trying to stop it on in a particular point on the wheel, and it's really hard. And I don't know anyone that's completed it. That one sticks in my mind. And then blowing up balloons until they pop. The bigger they are, the more money you get. But if they pop, you get nothing, and you've only got a certain amount of time. Things like that. A video interview. I think by the sounds of it, talking to a few of the in-state guys before this call, everyone's starting to get used to video calls. I, for one, now sit on the video call for at least sort of 3-4 hours a day, and feel quite comfortable sitting here talking to my laptop, which a year ago would have felt quite weird. But if you can practice talking into a camera, then great. If not, just take your time, control what you can around you, be in your chair early, so you're not out of breath or flustered or anything like that. I've put in brackets no interview there because I'm pretty sure Deloitte do this, and a couple of others. They use like pre-recorded questions, so they'll give you a scenario, and then you get a 30-second countdown to give your answer into the camera, and it's recorded. And then I'm guessing someone at the company looks through those videos, which would be a weird job, but they must do. And then you sort of work through, and they might ask you some simple questions as well, like what's your favourite book and why, and those kind of things. So just be prepared for those. They'll be part of an interview process most likely. Assessment centres, I can't talk to all the assessment centres because they will all have changed now. They'll all be done virtually, but pre-COVID, there's a lot of retesting, so making sure that you were the one that did your online tests and you didn't game them and get a mate to do it. I remember being sat in a room for a few, and you don't get told about it, sat in a room, given a numerical reasoning, diagrams, grammatical reasoning, and half an hour, and you have to do it, and if you don't pass the test, you get sent home. So there's retesting. Group exercises, I think the main thing on that is it's about managing personalities, which I do think is really important for consulting. The management consultants do it more than the strategy consultants because of the nature of their work and integrating into teams. But in a group exercise, you've normally got the shy people, the dominating people, and the people in the middle. You want to be someone in the middle. And a way of doing that, if you are a dominant person, is you're more than welcome to express your view and what you think, but you then need to bring other people into the conversation. So if you notice that someone is being quiet, you then say, okay, Sarah, what do you think? Or Kaz, what do you think? What's your opinion on this? Even if you don't agree with it, you just need to make them feel like they're being part of the process. That's my main tip with group exercises. One-to-one interviews, I think just being personable is important, being nice to everyone as well. My interview with Strategy, and I had my first afternoon interview cancelled, and the recruiter came up to me and was really apologetic, so sorry, blah, blah, blah. I was like, absolutely no problem. I'll jump outside, get a coffee, come back. Ended up being there till sort of 7 at night. They're like, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. And it was only once they then offered me the job that they were like, the way that you dealt with the cancellation, and you were so nice about it, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. Like, it did really help put you in a good light with the interviewers. So I think, the myth around being nice to the receptionist is definitely true, and people do talk when they're doing these things. And I think on the one-to-one interviews, it's important to know, so most companies will use a scorecard, whereby there'll be 4 or 5 criteria, and it will be around sort of whole leadership, which is like how you carry yourself. Are you confident or comfortable? You know, do you have an arrogance about you, which obviously is negative, things like that. There's your business acumen, how you understand concepts, your attitude, a lot of that EQ stuff comes into it, and they will score you on a scorecard, and then every person that interviews you will fill in the same scorecard, and you'll sort of get the average of those scores to make sure that you haven't just had one good interview, you know, they've all been good. So that's really helpful to know. And then Super Days, I don't know if people have come across this, but the way that it was heading, and I would guess it might work the same still now, is that you'll do everything on one day. So you'll go through the retesting, the group exercise, the one-to-one interviews all on one day. And with Oliver Wyman, they ended up with a dinner in the evening before anyone found out if they got the job or not, which is a bit bizarre and a bit intense. So yeah, be prepared for long days. They're emotionally draining, but good to get it all done in one day and find out pretty soon after whether you've got the job or not. So yeah, that's me. If you want to get hold of me, I run a website called Grad Interview Prep as well, that basically has my notes and stuff from applying to consulting. I've spoken to a lot of people over the last few weeks, so feel free to drop me a message. Happy to answer any more questions after this, but I don't know if anyone's got any questions now.
Yeah, we've had one through, Jonny. Someone's asked if there's any particular resources you would use or recommend for the numerical tests and online tests specifically.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I would do actually is probably go onto Excel and put a load of random numbers in a spreadsheet and make sure that you can multiply, divide, do all that basic GCSE stuff very quickly, because the quicker that you can do all of that stuff, the more time it gives you to do the thinking, because you will inevitably get stuck. So that's something that you can do for free. I have some articles on numericals on that website there, Grad Interview Prep, but there's sort of job test prep, assessment day, things like that. I think most universities should have like your careers service, and you can obviously get hold of any university's career service. So if you want Oxford or Cambridge or Imperial or Bath or whatever, they will all list numerical reasoning tests there. Beyond that, I think a quick Google, and there's a fair few out there, but it's all about reading graphs and being able to digest them quickly and do a couple of calculations. So yeah, I haven't got any specifics unfortunately, but I'm sure that there's plenty out there. Yeah,
I'd definitely recommend trying to do those calculations under timed pressure as well, because I know that's one of the things that can catch people out on the numerical tests. Second question, Jasmine has asked, how much case study practice did you have? In hindsight, how did you felt they went, and would you have wanted to have prepared more or less for them?
So I did a lot of prep for interviews, and I think the biggest thing that comes out of the interview rooms is that person bombed their case interview, because it's so obvious when someone hasn't done much practice in them. I did most of mine through like online resources that I bought, and then even just things like in a newspaper, you'll see in the business section, BA is cutting however many flights. You can turn that into a question around, BA is seeing that profitability is falling. How do you reverse this trend? And in the current environment, it comes around to people taking flights, bums in seats. So the first thing you do is offload a load of airplanes, that kind of thing. So and many of the scenarios that you get asked will be real life projects, because the person in the interview room has walked in, no preparation. They'll be on a project and they'll say, "This is the scenario. What do you think? Go away with it." And so they won't know an answer yet because they're still working on it. But it can be something that you see in a newspaper, things like that. In hindsight, I probably would have done more on not the sort of standards case interviews that everyone talks about. So I got unstuck badly by one, and it was the Oliver Wyman's Dubai office, and the question was, how much would you sell Dubai for? And looking back, I didn't know perfect answer, but at the time, you know, I was there trying to go through sort of these frameworks that everyone talks about. I'm sure people have seen like Big Chang on YouTube, those kind of things. Looking back, I was trying to apply a framework when really I should have just taken a step back and thought, okay, what is the value of a place like Dubai? It's its GDP. What's its GDP made up of? Dubai is mainly oil and tourism. How much are those worth? And that's that kind of question, and delve into the industries and then put a multiple on it and give a price. But I was trying to talk about growth and profitability and things like this, and it just went very badly, very quickly. So yeah, I think the more practice you can do, the better. And those arithmetic practice is really important. You'll get asked, you know, you don't have a calculator, and it'll be the unit cost of the item is £4.30, and revenue was £175,000. That product line, how many units were sold? So 170,000 divided by 4.3 without a calculator. Personally, even now, I would struggle. But at the time, I'd done so much practice in being able to do those calculations that it wasn't a problem. So don't get unstuck by the easy things in that sense.
Cool, thank you. And as a follow-up to that, they've asked specifically for strategy and how would you describe the difference between corporate strategy and the M&A team?
First of all, it's not really an M&A team. So if you see the PwC like org chart, it is ridiculous. But M&A is more in sort of the corporate finance team. So that kind of sits with our accountants, auditors, those kind of things. And our deals team sit in transaction services as well, but they're also called strategy and. But they do a lot of work in. The question was, what's the difference between the two, right? Corporate strategy and so the deals work is that commercial due diligence stuff. So they'll work for a lot for private equity houses on potential acquisitions, and they'll be part of the deal. And they use a lot of like expert interviews and things like that, which is quite interesting. So they'll talk to experts in the field, what's going on, what competitors doing, what would you be worried about, what are your risks, what are your growth opportunities. It's a very common way to approach it. I think what's good about it is you get to see sort of, you know, what's valued in a business, and a lot more around the numbers. So things around like revenues, cash flows, how would you would value a business in that sense. And then on the flip side, in corporate strategy, you're doing a lot more sort of strategic thinking around where do I want to take this business. So you're working not for a company looking to acquire a company, you're working for a company on how they grow it, or how they solve a problem themselves. So my projects in the last year, I've done technology, like new technology strategy for one of the world's biggest oil companies. So that's looking at specifically how they redesigned their commodities trading business. How do they bring in technologies like natural language processing, even blockchain? I hate to admit it, but that was mentioned. and things like that. And then how do they go and bring those technologies in? Do they hire an internal team? Do they acquire companies? Do they go out and hire new teams, etc.? I've also done like consumer analysis on how much water people are consuming for a water company, which is more interesting than it sounds. And we all consume shitloads of water. Then I've also worked on some COVID response stuff for the government, so was in the thick of it when it all kicked off. I've worked on sort of the interface between government and the private sector. I've worked for a company that builds data centers. So for your big tech companies of the world, they have warehouses for the computers, and how do they improve their offering to the big tech companies. So you're working on, in corporate strategy, you're working on these kind of like problems without an answer. It's probably a way to describe it. For strategy, and it's very easy for corporate strategy people to go and work in the deals team. It's less common for a deals person to come and work in the corporate strategy team. So I've also done a due diligence as well on a UK energy company that took investment earlier in the year. So it depends what you're into. If you're into like almost like reaching an answer more so, then the deals work is probably more your bag. If you're enjoyed like the high level thinking, how do I go out and take this business to the next level, then probably corporate strategy is for you. Corporate strategy, the downside is you also get caught in sometimes in like policy responses. So for water companies, for example, every 4 years they have to submit their policy response, how they're going to deal with customers, etc., because they're essentially a monopoly. Don't choose your water company. So you can do really long. I personally think that's the most boring part of the job, and I've never worked on those kind of projects as a result. But that's probably the downside to corporate strategy.
Yeah. So, sorry. Yeah. So the next question, I think you've kind of covered. It was how have you worked exclusively on strategy projects? But I guess what that's also asking is how much of a say do you get in the projects that you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've worked exclusively on, I say that I have done a due diligence, but it was with the corporate strategy team because they kind of wanted the expertise of one of the teams in our corporate function to do the due diligence. You do and you don't get a say. So someone that I joined with is phenomenal networking in the firm. It's all about who you know. Probably the way to describe it is how a project gets staffed. So a project will come in, it's been sold by a partner or a director. They will then probably fuck off and you'll never see them again. But they've written it all, and so you have to decipher what it is. It will get left to a senior manager or a manager who will then be told you're doing this project, and then they have a certain budget that they can staff the project with. So a manager might take a senior associate and associate with them on the project. So if you have a good relationship with that manager, the manager will likely staff you on the project. They're after people that make their lives easier. So if you're good, you'll get staffed by them. So you can build relationships with these managers. I personally get on really well with 2 or 3 managers, and I've worked almost exclusively with them since I joined. The other way to do it, if you don't know someone, it's really common to just reach out to someone and say, hey, I'd love to hear more about the kind of work you do, and get involved. You'd then have a conversation and say, look, I want to be involved in like your next project. They will probably staff you then. It's kind of the way it works. If not, if you're either available or you don't have someone asking for you, you just go into the pool, and we have an internal resourcing team that will then staff you on a project. So if there's people looking for an associate or whatever, then they'll just ping you and say you're starting on this project on Monday. Reach out to X manager and you're away. Which is why the getting on with people is so important, because on a Friday afternoon you can get told that you're working on a project with a different team that you've never met before, and you just have to jump in straight away and get on with everyone. So it can work like that, but it's kind of in your own hands as well.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a question from Mark, who's asked, how do you work on and demonstrate your business acumen, I guess in an interview or on an assessment day?
So I think it's hard unless you get asked the right question. I think if you've done any experience in a sort of business management role away from analytics, so whether that's sales or project management or things like that, I think that helps. I think in a case interview scenario, it's really apparent, because say someone's asking about the energy industry, which is run on super tight margins. So these big companies are basically buying energy and selling energy, and they just sit in the middle. So everyone's buying the energy at the same price. So how do you compete? The best way to compete is to have the cheapest cost of customer acquisition. So those with the lowest cost of acquisition will win in that market. What's going on in the energy industry for consumers? You've now got comparison websites where you find good deals. So that's probably something that you should know about just from day-to-day understanding of the way the world works. But you could get there without knowing, having that kind of business acumen and awareness of how the market works. But I think it's a big plus if you can get there straight away and know that most people are buying their energy off comparison websites and have that kind of perspective. That's kind of what I mean by business acumen. Or if you can also compare across industries and different business models. So one company is taking this model. I'm trying to think of an example, but maybe in like groceries, you've got people like your Morrisons, Sainsbury's, etc., who are both buying and making their own products and selling them, and then you've got people like Ocado, who's operating in the same space, but their USP is being online and being unbelievably efficient with their warehousing distribution. So you've got two people operating in the same market, but with two different business models. So that's another way of showing business acumen, I suppose.
Okay, thank you. The next question's kind of about your personal experience and one of the things you've just mentioned. They've asked, how come you applied to an office in Dubai? Do many English grads go there for consulting jobs?
So interesting question. So I said back on the CV and cover letter to name drop, I knew someone that was working in the Dubai office at Oliver Wyman. She did her placement year with Oliver Wyman in the UK and got offered a job in Dubai and took it. And I didn't mind the thought of going to Dubai. I'm glad I haven't. It would have been working a lot in Saudi on big like health projects and government projects. But I knew that she was there. I'd spoken to her, and so she was the name that I was going to drop on the cover letter. So tactically, I then applied to the Dubai office, and that's the reason I thought it was my best chance of getting a job with Oliver Wyman.
Okay. Last question. Would you recommend any paid resources for case studies? For example, Victor Cheng's resources.
Yeah, so I've seen a few of them. I sell some of my own on grad interview prep. I would recommend, it depends how much time that you're willing to put in to developing that kind of skill set. If you understand exactly what is required from a case interview, then like I said, even just picking out things that are going on in the world and turning them into your own case interview question and being like, okay, how would I answer this? It's great. If you don't fully understand it, then being shown what a good answer looks like repeatedly, I think is super helpful and super valuable. For example, so think of like a pret-a-manger. I don't know if I've said that right. I'm not very good with languages. they are obviously having to shut stores and cut staff right now, turn that into a question. There's a high street coffee and delicatessen, I don't know, food shop that's experiencing a huge impact from COVID-19. Profitability is going down. How can they reverse the trend? You split it out into revenue and costs, and then go into your cost lines of your fixed costs and your variable costs, and then dig into each one and see which ones you can cut. And ultimately, you're going to end up probably somewhere around shutting stores and firing staff, unfortunately. But that's a very real life situation. It's the kind of question that you would get asked as a strategy house. It's the analysis that people would do to see how much they think they could save from that kind of thing. So yeah, if you're willing to put in the time, you don't necessarily need to spend anything. But I think most people I've spoken to, including myself, did at least look at some paid resources. Whether they were the ones that paid for it or not is another question. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jonny. We're going to wrap up now. If anyone else does have any other questions, I'm sure Jonny wouldn't mind emailing that email out there. Alternatively, get in touch via any of the social media platforms to Instate. I would like to say this is the first event of many professional development series. I know we've got a great event coming up on the case study and cracking that in particular. Yeah, so just keep an eye out on Instate's social media for those upcoming events. And yeah, just a quick message to say that we are at the very beginning of our journey at Instate. So any support you can give, even if that's just a quick post on social media, would be hugely appreciated. But that's the end of our session, so I'll end the call there. But thank you everyone for coming.
Cheers, guys. Do you need anything else from me, Yasmin?
Not tonight. I'll send you an email though. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.